My name is Mark Roziers, and I'm the moderator of this seminar. A very warm welcome to the 8th event of the FFA 2021 Solutions Week. Measured by the number of registrations for this webinar, more than 655 persons, carbon farming is the absolute #1 on this week's FFA hit parade. It is clear that the expectations of both climate and agriculture advocates are high. Carbon farming may well be that new green business model that could link climate and farming practice in a win-win situation. And it puts soil again in the center of the discussion. So thanks to ELO and Indigo for programming this webinar in the FFA Solutions Week. But as with all new business models, the puzzle has not yet been fully put together. During this webinar, we want to give you an insight into which pieces already exist, what can be further refined and adjusted, and which missing pieces still need to be filled in based on in-field experiences. Dear audience, to achieve this, an exquisite panel has been put together. I'm passing through. Could you click the next slide, please? So to achieve this, an exquisite panel is at your disposal. Nicola De Virgilio is the second national expert at DG Agri in the unit Environment, Climate Change, Forestry and Bioeconomy. He is an expert in climate change and agriculture and decision supporting tools for farmers. Georg Görres, a real globetrotter, head of Europe at Indigo Agriculture Europe, has a 24-year career strategizing for and achieving success in agricultural industry. Bela Jankovic, co-owner and manager of Jankovic-Birtok Sustainable Estate in Hungary, is active on the crossroads of agriculture, the environment, and technical and social innovation. Valentina Secchi is a soil scientist specialized on soil ecology and functionality. She works as an associate professor at the Van Hol Larenstein University in the Netherlands, where she coordinates research activities within the EU Interreg project Carbon Connects. Rolf Sommer is Director, Agriculture and Land Use Change at WWF Germany. As an agronomist and biologist, Rolf has spent his last decades developing and finding sustainable management solutions to the complexities of achieving food and nutrition security, sustainable agricultural development, nature conservation, biodiversity, and agro-ecosystem functioning. And finally, Jelmer van der Moortel from the Netherlands works for Rabobank to develop innovative, meaningful, and pragmatic solutions in the food and agri domain. Each panelist will have 8 minutes to explain his or her insights. Afterwards, each speaker will act as a discussant for a fellow panelist through specific questions. Dear participants, please use the Q&A for your questions. Our back office will monitor it continuously and forward questions through me to the panel. This webinar will be recorded and will be available on the FFA 2020 website. So the scene is set. Let's give the floor to the first speaker. Nicola De Virgilio will link farming with the EU climate and biodiversity goals by increasing carbon sinks to nature-based solutions. Nicola, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I will try to speak about what is the Commission vision on the carbon farming and also the link with the biodiversity goal. I'm very happy to be here and also thank you for the invitation. This topic, I think, really will be quite debated in the following months, and also this angle of looking at carbon farming not only for climate goal but also for also as a tool for incentivizing biodiversity in land management it's quite interesting, and also I think it's really deserving attention. If I have to introduce about the vision on carbon farming for the European Commission, is then worth to recall the current policy framework and the initiatives from which this concept is stemming from, which is of course the Green Deal and the higher climatic ambitions for EU on the climate neutrality in the new climate law, and in the established pathway for this new climatic target for 2030 that now needs to be is being increased to 55% compared to 1990. The impact assessment published by the Commission recently on the new climate target plan for 2030 concluded that land and therefore agriculture and forestry plays really a crucial role for both of them, both for the neutrality and even for the new climatic target. We see that emissions can be reduced in a responsible way from the impact assessment, and as for the other sectors, agriculture as well will have to contribute to reduce the emissions. However, the sink as well needs to be significantly increased in order to balance residual emissions from that we will have in 2050, particularly from the agricultural sector and some other residual emissions. So this is when the Commission started then with several initiatives to work on the sink, of course, together with the reduction of emissions. But then the Commission also already started presenting this concept in a council, Agrifish Council, in 2019, encouraging member states to have a look at these schemes and trying to design, start thinking and supporting designing scheme for this, for increasing the sink, and we also included in the farm to fork strategy, in the new adaptation strategy as a tool for promote nature-based solution. The Commission is financing different life projects on the implementation on the ground of schemes, and also preparatory project, life project again, where we are trying to link more, focusing more on data and data set as enabling factors. Another very important piece of work is this study done by DG Klima on analytical support for the operationalization of EU carbon farming initiatives, with different roundtables done already last year and the year before, where the Commission put together examples that are already happening now on the ground and in Europe and also outside Europe, with the idea to publish a guidance handbook soon, I think really in days, to support the setup of result-based mechanisms and for pilot testing these schemes in Europe. And also we have to remember that as a Commission we provided to member states tailor-made recommendations on the Common Agricultural Policy Strategic Plan and Green Deal targets, and here even also in this recommendation we pushed a lot of attention on carbon farming, which has been widely mentioned to member states as a potential tool. Also, a couple of weeks ago, we had another workshop on the role of agricultural land use sectors in a climate neutral EU in 2050, and other events will be organized in the course of this year. The idea is to have a communication on carbon farming initiatives by the end of this year, as it is also foreseen in the farm to fork strategy. It's as an action of the farm to fork strategy. Well, we can easily realize that that the role of carbon farming can be very well beneficial for biodiversity as well, as because carbon removal, sequestration, and protection can indeed mostly done with nature-based solutions. And this important function of increasing soil organic carbon in arable lands in EU and protecting carbon in soils which already has a high content of carbon, and also increase the amount of carbon stored in biomass, are very well connected with increasing biodiversity in soil, increased biodiversity in grassland, protecting grasslands, protecting peatland, restoring wetland, and rewetting peatlands, and also increased elements such as landscape elements, agroforestry systems, and of course also important role of the afforestation. That's why carbon farming at the end is mentioned in the really several Green Deal strategies as the one, even in the methane strategy. And of course, I already mentioned the adaptation strategy as a tool for stimulating nature-based solution, and as well, the European Forest Strategy is also quite relevant piece of work. As you know, forest is extremely important in this context. It is where the highest potential is when we talk about sink. And of course, in trying to ensure policy coherence among all these different strategies, the Commission will try to make this tool beneficial both for climate and biodiversity. This is where it's the main function it is. So there are still several open questions you might probably know better than me, and we hope to solve also through the interaction and discussion like the one that we are having today in this event, for example. Some dimensions related to the design, on the governance and eligibility, on the monitoring, reporting, and verification, on the rewarding mechanisms, if action-based or result-based, both have pros and cons, on how the CAP interact with the common agriculture policy interact with other potential way to support this farming scheme. Anyway, what we know that is that we need a robust certification rule for carbon removals. This is the first step to enable payments to farmers and foresters for the carbon sequestration. And in the context of the Circular Economy Action Plan, we are exploring the development of a regulatory framework for certifying carbon removals with a robust and transparent carbon accounting methodology. The work starts already. There will be several occasions during this year for consultations. It will not only focus on, let's say, nature-based solution, but also on removals through technology. The idea is to have a proposal from the Commission in the end of 2022, beginning 2023, and the study, anyway, there is already a study that started with the final result expected for the beginning of 2022. Another important element is the necessity to have carbon calculators, and here the Commission, DG Agri in particular, is running a study for adding a module of greenhouse gases emissions accounting to the farm sustainability tool, which is a new guide of the common agricultural policy. I think that that was my last slides. I really thank you for your attention, and here you have some links from which you can also see analysis of current initiatives, and I'm really eager to listen to the following presentation. Maybe we can solve some of these uncertainties already here today. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Nicola, for your presentation, and I think it will be very interesting also for Georg, who will now present a feasible, practical pathway for regenerative agriculture practice to verified carbon units, which are tradable and thus generate revenue. Georg, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you very much as well, Nicola. I think indeed we have a few things which we can also debate afterwards. So my name is Georg Oeris. I'm the head of Europe for Indigo Agriculture, and I'm very pleased as well to be here with you today and debate one of the most important topics certainly we have on the agenda in agriculture today, which is carbon farming. There's a very quick snapshot. Normally I should be able to move the slide. Here we go. Quickly, for what is Indigo all about. Our mission is to harness nature to help farmers to sustainably feed the planet. Key focus areas are around improving the farmer profitability, looking to improve sustainability in agriculture, and as well align better agricultural practices with consumer health and their environmental needs. The key solution we have right now in Europe where we only got established in 2019. The company itself is still relatively young, headquartered in Boston, built 2014. So we are operating in Europe now since about 2 years. We have two offers which we bring to the market. One is Indigo Carbon, where I'm going to talk about mainly today, which is helping to have farmers offer farmer solutions to carbon sequestration, to increase their soil quality, as well as having some carbon credits which can be marketed in the market, as well as our biological offer, which we market under Biotrinsic, which is helping farmers to have biological input for their production process. What is this carbon farming all about? It's basically, for us, we believe that actually farming can be part of the solution to fight against climate change. And we have a very significant natural carbon sink, which is the soil. And we do believe that carbon farming can help to have a scalable, affordable, intermediate way to give some of the answers in terms of the carbon reduction in the atmosphere. We do believe it needs to be both. Actually, one is we need to have reduction of carbon emission, but also ideally we have removals. And soil is a big carbon sink which could help to have those removals realized. What would need to be done for this? The way to sequester carbon is via regenerative farming practices. There are many of them, but we've just basically summarized this into 5 key areas, which is plant cover crops, use no or little tillage, crop rotations, reduced inputs, and incorporate livestock, ideally on the farm. So when farmers move to those regenerative practices, we can certainly sequester carbon in the soil, can measure that, and then also certify it. Now, how does this work? Keep this short. It's actually, there are 4 blocks basically to look at. One is that the grower needs to take action and says, okay, I would like to take some fields I select to move into carbon farming. So they are set up, the field boundaries are collected, and also the new way of actively working on the field is then defined. So the new regenerative plan is done. This can also be done through some of our partners, because Indigo believes in partnering. So we also have some go-to-market partners, and I have a slide in a minute on this, in conjunction with the grower to sign them up. We would then collect all this data, which is submitted, which is then also validated by external third parties, independent, to make sure that the data which is submitted is also all correct and that the action has been done. And then that's forwarded to a certifier. In the European context, that will be Vera VCS, who has a robust methodology to certify that indeed this CO2 has been sequestered in the soil, and can then issue a carbon credit, which Indigo then can sell to interested parties, which can be multiple, which can be companies, which can be governments, it could be NGOs, this could be private consumers who could be interested in purchasing and making a contribution to the climate improving. Let's very quickly run through this. What's key on all this in terms of the, in our view, is the high quality standard. We are very clear on this. It is absolutely critical that we have a high quality approach to it, and otherwise I do believe that we have too many areas where this can be criticized for not being the right approach. So we believe that working through partners such as Vera, or in the US Climate Action Reserve, with robust methodologies and key attributes, which is the realness, additionality is key, it needs to be measurable, permanence needs to be ensured, and also no double counting. These are key elements we believe are absolutely imperative for any program to be a long-term successful. So far, we seem to be quite successful in also attracting interest from many players already across different industries. Who says, yes, we believe the Indigo approach could really make a difference in agriculture, and many organizations which are listed on the right have already signed up and worked with us, and have declared their interest in purchasing carbon credits to make sure that we can grow that program. Quickly back to Europe, where are we? We do early pilots right now. Last year we started to work with one of our partners, Vasa, which is a Barilla Group company, where we focus on rye growers. Here the the key of this first pilot is to understand how can we reduce the shelf emissions. So this is really a reduction of emissions, and Vasa is super interested and keen in having their greenhouse balance neutral, and look for this in their own production process. So I think this is a highly interesting opportunity for us to book them. And very recently, a few weeks ago, we launched our first carbon program in Germany in conjunction with our partner Biodiversity, who's helping us in signing up the growers, identifying the growers, which that program is aimed to ultimately issue carbon credits. So all the work which is done right now in this pilot is gearing towards that. So we work on these two areas right now in Europe, and we plan to extend that further also into other markets and countries as we go along. But we believe it's absolutely critical that you take the first step in the right way, so that you really learn what are the elements you need to do, make sure you have the methodology and your approach robust. And then of course when we have that all, then we want to scale that further, because we strongly believe in that opportunity. To conclude, so we strongly believe that regenerative carbon farming friendly practices can deliver agronomic and environmental and climate benefits. We also believe, as said, that a robust methodology is absolutely critical to ensure there's integrity and quality of any carbon credit which is generated. Then very clearly we believe that for learning from the pilots with our partners in Europe, because every market is different and every region is different, we will be taking those learnings for when we prepare to scale this up. Partnership is critical for us. There are many people out there who think in the same direction, and we rather work together with those partners than in isolation. So that is absolutely something which is in the backbone basically of Indigo. And last but not least, also of course we are also very keen in sharing results and learnings, also to contribute to any policy making process, because we know that it is critical that the regulatory framework needs to be done in a way which incentivizes or gives opportunity for public solutions, of course, by Brussels, so to say, but also that the private sector has also a role to play to work together towards towards the goal of CO2 neutrality in the years to come. And that was actually my last slide, Mark, and I hand it back over to you. Thank you very much. Mark, can't hear you.
The next speaker is, thank you, Georg. The next speaker is Bela Jankovic, who will clarify from a farmer's perspective the conditions for scaling up regenerative carbon farming. Bela, thank you for looking through the farmer's glasses. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mark, and happy to be here as well. Yes, I will first focus on regenerative farming itself, how it works at our farm, because it's so crucial and essential to this whole storyline. Then a bit the bigger picture, my vision on regenerative ag. What are the typical adoption hurdles in ag and food systems? Why is this not scaling faster than it should be? And how can carbon farming play a role into that? So on our farm, a family estate which I manage, we have a mixed farm with arable crops, livestock, and other activities. So our plan is to think in generations. And we also embrace the 4 returns principle from common land, which means we don't only focus on return on financial capital, but also return of natural capital and social capital. In this way, we try to build hope and inspiration for all stakeholders here involved. Regenerative farming is at the core of that because regenerative farming is about improving the soil. We want to give the soil in a better form and shape to the future generations. And what does that mean in practice for us? Already mentioned by Georg for some examples, extensive crop rotation. So next to wheat and sunflower, rapeseed, corn, we also added radish, crimson clover, hemp, canary seed, phacelia, and others into our crop rotation. Also, 25% of all arable land is at any time is alfalfa, excellent for the soil, but not for the revenues. You cannot sell a crop in those 25%. We also have lots of cover crops to protect the soil. We do conservation, soil treatment, so no plowing. Kilometers of borders around the fields for insects and supporting biodiversity. integrated cattle grazing, we limit as much as we can our fertilizer chemical application by precision farming. We're also very much involved in water management and erosion prevention. So some impressions how this looks. Top left is alfalfa. We have to go on back. Top left is alfalfa fields. Top right is crimson clover on a field. Bottom right is our Hereford cattle grazing. And the bottom left is actually a arable land prone to erosion converted into permanent grassland, where we also did some measures against the watershed. You see the little ponds there. So why did we do this? The vision, as mentioned already, is because it's important for long term. This is the way how to give a better estate to future generations. But it was only possible with when the funding program came along. It's called the AKG program here in Hungary. It comes from the Pillar 2. And to give you an impression, it's around 150 euros per hectare that covers most of the cost from the activities I mentioned. And also give you an impression, only cover crops to do that per hectare, it depends what you do and where you are, but you can say around 60 to 80 euros per hectare is needed to cover the cost of cover crops. So without this kind of subsidies, this progress in regenerative ag and improving the soil would not be possible. After 5 years, I can say success on all levels. We created new jobs. We see more resilient nature. And I think over time, we will also be more resilient financially. I don't like to be dependent on subsidies. I think no farmer wants to be. But as long as our food is as cheap as it is, this is the only way to move to this direction. In general speaking, and Georg and others already mentioned, regenerative ag is the answer, I think, should become mainstream to achieve the climate and biodiversity goals of the EU. So why is this not more adopted? I'm also involved in several other activities and organizations, and I try to categorize the common adoption hurdles which we see for adopting new technologies or practices. Prove the value creation. In a natural system, it's hard to say, okay, that measure gave so much money back. There's so many variables turning around, not so easy to say. Complexity. The farm everyday life is already very complex. You rather have less complexity than more. Navigate vested interest. We know there are very big strategic players active and not necessarily welcoming innovations. Think, act long term. Regenerative ag, you have to think long term, but if you are leasing 5-6 years your land, it's hard to think long term. These are obstacles. So here I made a presentation up on the left side, the adoption hurdles. The first column of traffic lights is basically the program which we used in the last 5 years, where regenerative farming practices were supported by subsidies. And the second column could be when carbon credit farming schemes are in place. So you see on the first column of traffic lights, actually quite in the green, only yellow is handle complexity. That was for us quite a challenge, because to get all these new practices in place, to learn about them, but also to administer them properly, to get the subsidy is complex, and was for us for sure a hurdle to take. If you go to the right, the second column for carbon credit farming schemes, I put the first light on the yellow, proof of value creation. If you think right now, just take a number that you can sequester 2 tons of carbon per hectare with these practices. And right now, the carbon credit price is around 20 euros per ton. It's around 40 euros per hectare, which doesn't cover even a fraction of the cost which is needed. Also, for carbon credits, of course, you have to prove there's a credit. You don't get paid for your practices, you have to prove there's a credit. So far, for me, at this moment in time, that's yellow. Handle complexity. I think actually we will be very helped when these carbon credit farming schemes come in place, because I'm sure that with innovation, tools will come available that the complexity that comes inherently with regenerative farming practices will be lowered. This hurdle will be lowered. Navigate vested interest on both are green, because basically the rewards go for a good part straight to the farmer. And finally, think and act long term. In the carbon credit farming schemes, we have to think of 10, 25, maybe 50 or 100 years, at least for sure a liability for a farmer that he will take along. For now, that is unclear how this can be properly handled. My message is for today, I think our goal should be that all the traffic lights come on green, that all the hurdles will be taken down, that the adoption of regenerative farming practices will be as large as possible. And therefore, a combination of these 2 schemes will be necessary, and also many other tools. So with that, I'd like to conclude and thank you for your attention. And I hope we can all join together on a journey to make regenerative ag the mainstream in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bella. We catched up some time. Thank you very much. So I will give immediately the floor to Valentina Secchi. As said in the beginning, she is responsible for the scientific coordination of Interreg project Carbon Connects. And the floor is yours, Valentina.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for giving me the opportunity today to share our perspective and bring our experience about Carbon Connects, which is, as Mark said, a project that I'm coordinating and is funded by Interreg Northwest Europe. I'm here today also at the name, I'm honored to bring the voice also the other Interreg project running at the same time together with Carbon Connects, and we all focus on the transition and sustainable transition and how we can help sustainable peatland management in the future. Okay, go back to the question of this panel, how to realize the climate and biodiversity goals. Well, our perspective is that we need complete cessation of peatland drainage and restore peatland functionality. Why we should do that and how? That's the aim of this short presentation I would like to bring to your attention today. So peatland, in my experience, I know that peatland sometimes not very known, and a lot of people just doesn't know what peatland is. So just to align everybody, peatlands is a natural ecosystem which is characterized by the accumulation of organic matter that derives from the decay material that comes from the plant that die and fall in the water, and then they are not degraded and stays there and they accumulate. Peatland is cover only the 3% of the entire world surface, but instead is also storing 30% of the total carbon that is present in the soil. So basically, peatland are the most efficient and long-term carbon store and sink in our planet. And just to give you an idea of and to visualize, peatland stores twice the carbon that all the forests on Earth store. So as you see, peatland is very important for carbon storage, and also they provide biodiversity, and because of their retained water, they also prevent flooding and mitigate risk for flooding and increase resilience for soil. A functional peatland works in a way that there is a balance between the emission of methane and the uptake of carbon. However, when we drain peatland and we want to use it, for example, for peatland is removed and peatland is used for as a substrate for pot, for gardening, also for greenhouse cultivation, or when it turns into productive land, then this balance is broken, and then we assist to an incredible releasing of CO2 emissions into the air. However, this system, this process can be also turned back, and then we can also restore peatland again, and also implement new practices which allow the reduction of greenhouse gas emission from our land. So then the question is, where is peatland? Where is located? Mainly because peatland are a wet system, so they need water. Arid countries have less peatland than compared to the Nordic countries. But also, if you look at the emission and the contribution of the emission for Europe, in the map on the left, you see with dark red the country in which we have more emission, and the EU is the second largest emitter of greenhouse gas emission that comes from draining peatland, and this is equivalent to the 5% of the official EU carbon emission. And in some countries, 25% of the emission coming from peatland are for, so the 25% of the emission coming from peatland come from agricultural soil. So why we are not converting and why we are not restoring peatland? Well, what we find out during our activity in our project is that mainly there is a lot of uncertainty coming from the fact that when farmers have to want to change and switch to a more sustainable agriculture and wet agriculture, there is not a well-established market for peatland product. Also, there are many technical challenges for rewetting and to establish also new crops. Also, there is also, have been said by Bella, there are also difficult access to long-term incentives, very complicated to understand and orientating in the different possibility for getting incentive. Also, there is a lack of societal recognition for the importance of peatland. So the society is not very well informed and aware about this problem and the contribution that peatland could play in the climate change mitigation goals. Also, policy gap. We don't have at the moment a common metrics to estimate the benefit that comes from restored peatland. We don't have a common certification or accreditation systems. And also, we don't have at the European level a centralized organization that actually can account and monitor the greenhouse gas emission coming from land. So then at the end, what we need and what we lack at the moment is a common framework for incentive and for eco-credit systems. So then again, if we go back to the original question, again, my answer is still the same. We should stop peatland drainage, but how we can do that? So we need to introduce long-term specific payment for farmers to keep carbon in the ground, but also reward for the good practices. Also, we need a cohesion between the Green Deal and the current common agricultural policies and all the different European framework that recognize wetland as a sustainable agricultural practices and also recognize the importance of restoring peatland. Also, what we need is a support and long-term commitment that can help support the farmers. And with this, I conclude. I would like to thank you all for the attention and also, oh, sorry, I went too fast. I want to show all the partners that are involved in the project of Carbon Nest and the other Interact project. Thank you. I can't hear you, Mark. I think you're muted.
Thank you, Valentina. I thank you very much for your testimonial. And now I would like to give you the floor to Rolf Sommer, who will give his view on how the climate and biodiversity goals can be met by carbon farming. Rolf, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks for unmuting me. I thought I was unable to speak. Thanks a lot and welcome everybody. I'm really happy and I thank the organizers for inviting me to be able to speak here about that topic. Before going into the details, I thought I should spend a few minutes on just explaining what WWF is. We are not selling pots and pans. This is another organization. We are one of the biggest nature conservation organizations globally. We have more than 5.4 million followers. We are present in over 100 countries and we are active since already 60 years now. The mission of the Worldwide Fund for Nature is to conserve nature and reduce the most pressing threats to diversity of life on Earth. And our vision is to build a future in which people live in harmony with nature. Not many people, I mean, WWF is often known for conserving big mammals and animals and biodiversity and rainforest, but we also work on sustainable agricultural management and more recently also on sustainable food systems. And I just wanted to say that we believe that these are key for providing sufficient and healthy food to a growing population. But we can also achieve conservation of nature by eliminating pressures on natural land and habitats and operating within safe planetary boundaries. But sustainable agriculture, and that's what we are talking here about, is also a way to adapting to climate change and also to climate change mitigation. Before coming back to the carbon topic, I just wanted to say that we just recently released a corporate climate strategy in which we basically summarize, I think, a few issues that I find important also in the discussion on potential carbon credits and corporation or companies buying or buying certificates and farmers benefiting. First of all, we must recognize the Kyoto era is over. There's a shift in paradigms. We have committed ourselves since the beginning of this year now that we want to follow at least two important objectives: reducing greenhouse gas emissions to near zero, and then removing carbon from the atmosphere, and doing that secondly by global coverage. So that's a paradigm shift in terms of what we've seen before in Kyoto. It's the entire planet. So we also ask corporates to commit to cut value chain emissions. So the first and foremost important goal is cut emissions, reduce emissions, and then financially as a second step, and I will explain this in a bit more detail later, commit to value chain emission reduction and offsetting pieces financially. The second part is enable the transition to a zero carbon society. This is about active promotion, advocacy for climate change mitigation. And then please communicate effective action, not obscure labels. This is about being proud of the Paris compatible climate strategies and communication ambitions and actions in precision and integrity. So how do we realize the climate goals thanks to carbon farming? And I would like to go back and say, well, this is not only about carbon farming. This is about sustainable farming practices in very general terms. And we believe that these are key to realizing biodiversity targets globally. And this is because agriculture, as it is these days, has a massive environmental footprint. The photo I'm showing here, destruction of rainforests in Brazil, is one of the examples that we see these days. So coming back and transforming agriculture and getting it on a sustainable pathway is a major thing to slow down biodiversity loss. We must transform the current agricultural and food systems to operate within safe planetary boundaries. So then now carbon farming. I don't want to spoil the party, but I really would like to emphasize that we must manage our expectations. We can only contribute a humble share to realizing the Paris goals by carbon farming. And this has been published and proven by many publications, and I listed two on the right where I have been part as co-author some years back. And we started realizing that the current things and also some viable ambitious pathways are not even sufficient for mitigation requirements of the agricultural sector itself. If we focus on carbon only, then we will overlook other important emissions from agriculture. And this is, for example, nitrous oxide and methane emissions. So if somebody says we want to do a net greenhouse gas abatement, then that must be included. So in a nutshell, I think carbon sinks is a core benefit, not the primary and sole goal of the entire idea of building back soil organic carbon. But I also would like to emphasize, and I don't want to throw the baby with the bath here, we see many positive benefits from building soil organic carbon, especially in tropical soils. Soil organic matter is the basis of soil fertility and stabilizing soil and combating soil degradation. I mentioned it already, we still see significant greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture. And I showed here the IPCC figure, which probably most of you have seen before. But you can see here that the agriculture, forestry, and other land use sector is responsible for 24% of direct emissions. Now we are talking about, okay, the industry can pay the agricultural sector because the industry needs to reduce emissions. That's somehow odd. industry has less direct emissions than the AFOLU sector. So what we're discussing here, the potential of companies buying into the agricultural sector, is only possible because the agricultural sector has no reduction goals, no mandatory goals. But we believe the sector will have to reduce its own climate footprint, and therefore will have little to nothing to give away from or to sell to other sectors. And we've seen in the past the false hopes of offsetting and CDMs, and we've seen several studies where we could clearly see the CDMs of the past decade have not achieved what we wanted to see. That's why we say we need a paradigm shift. We need to go into reduce emissions first of all. Then companies can quantify and the financial commitment by pricing the remaining emissions that they cannot avoid. And this money needs to go into investments, into commitments for climate and nature impact. That's the most important piece. Don't offset ton by ton, but offset the real costs that occurred. The last but not least, the slide is, we believe WWF that the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, is the lever of choice for realizing additional key things in agriculture. And I highlighted two things, the conditionalities and the good agricultural and environmental conditions. These are two major points where we can support agricultural practices that help also sinking carbon in soils. And we've heard about the European Green Deal and biodiversity strategies before. So if I had to summarize it, I would say, what is a viable and very concrete way forward? I would say fund, reward agricultural practices, focus on practices, not on tons of carbon sequestered. Then we have time enough, and we don't have that pressure to measure each last little ton of carbon, but we can do accompanying pilot monitoring and evaluation work and do the science. And last but not least, we can also estimate the sinks or the avoided emission by some robust methods. And that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rolf. Thank you for bringing us back with 2 feet on the ground. Jelmer van de Moortel is now the next speaker, and he will explain a little bit more about the Acorn project he is accompanying. I give you the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mark. And great to see so many participants today interested in the topic of carbon farming. Within Rabobank, I'm an innovation lead, and we are developing innovation projects for our international wholesale and rural activities. And I'm also in charge of our agroforestry program that we run for smallholder farmers. At Rabobank, our mission is to grow a better world together. And that's also why we are looking to build a more sustainable and inclusive food system. And that also in preparation of the UN Food System Summit that will be held later this year. The food system that gives us access to more sufficient food for a growing population, but food that's good for you, but also for the planet. And I think that's all covered in the topic of carbon farming. As such, today I want to bring across 3 messages. 1, it's beyond carbon farming. 2, we want to make it inclusive for all farmers worldwide. And 3, also make it scalable. Today I will explain a bit about our agroforestry program. Within Rabobank, we have also different carbon farming programs, for instance, targeted at soil. The solution that we are developing is a platform that supports farmers in the smallholder farmers in transition to agroforestry. We are developing the platform together with Microsoft to leverage their technology, and do this also together with external satellite monitoring companies. Smallholder farmers with less than 5 hectares in developing countries that transition to agroforestry are monitored by satellite monitoring companies that measure the above the ground biomass, and that's what we translate in ex-post carbon removal units for the voluntary carbon market. So this is really about carbon sequestration, not about carbon reduction or avoidance. And fully agree also with the previous speaker. First and foremost, companies should be incentivized to reduce their footprint, but those companies that want to offset, compensate their unavoidables, can buy the carbon removal units that are being generated by those smallholder farmers. We always work together with local intermediaries in those developing countries, NGOs like Solidaridad, agtech companies like Auxfin, and local cooperatives, savings and credit cooperatives. We have sold the first carbon removal units at the beginning of this year. We are currently working on the certification, further enhancing the accuracy of the satellite monitoring and scaling the proposition. So as I mentioned, the first thing I want to make clear about carbon farming is beyond carbon sequestration. If we do it right, carbon farming and the various methods that we can apply, it's not only about carbon sequestration, it's also about improving the quality of the soil, preventing land degradation, providing more food security. The biodiversity, as we discussed, has been discussed also by the other panelists. And this has implications actually on the level of the farmer, but also on a macro level. So for the farmer, the benefits should be in place, creating an additional revenue stream, but also on a regional level. This can be a key reason to start this intervention. As I mentioned, if we want to do it right, we should not only do this for large farmers, but also for smallholder farmers. Smallholder farmers are all across the globe. There are more than 500 million farmers, also mainly in Asia, but also more than 50 million smallholder farmers in Africa, and they play a key role in providing food for those countries. And if we help those farmers, we believe we can also support the globe in increasing the productivity across the globe. Those smallholder farmers have always been challenged in scaling up their productivity, whether it was the limitations to good access to inputs, a lack of access to fair markets, a lack of access to finance, or a lack of access to information and knowledge. We believe we found an instrument that helps those farmers in scaling up their productivity. And that's what we do with agroforestry. With the agroforestry, we believe, so perhaps one step back, with agroforestry, several systems can be mentioned. It can be a combination of trees and crops, or trees and animals, or combining those all three, so trees, crops, and animals, also referred to as agro-silvopastoral systems. And like I mentioned already, this has benefits for the farmer on several aspects. It's improving the soil quality and the fertility. It's diversifying its offset, its food produce, so he's no longer depending on just one type of food produce. He's more resilient against weather and climate shocks, also produce alternative nutritions for his own diet, and on a larger scale, it also sequesters carbon for this farm. Why didn't farmers transition to agroforestry? Also has to do with the, like I mentioned, with the high pre-financing cost. And we believe that we can accelerate smooth this transition to agroforestry, also giving access to the international carbon markets, making it more inclusive as well. Those farmers do not have yet often access to this international carbon markets because of the high monitoring costs and certification costs. And as mentioned also by our previous speakers, we always should make sure that we live up to the high quality and also high integrity of those projects. But still, we want to unlock the potential for these farmers as well. And that's why we are working also, one of the game changers in this case is that we do the monitoring with the satellite monitoring. And the satellite monitoring measures the biomass from a year ago, measures the biomass today. And as such, it helps us in estimating, calculating the sequestered carbon dioxide at a very cost-efficient manner. And by doing so, then we are also able to scale up the numbers of farmers that can participate and enhance the acceleration of the transition to agroforestry. As mentioned before, the three things I wanted to explain to you is how can we make carbon farming more approach carbon farming beyond just the sequestration of carbon. I think by living up or improving the livelihoods of those smallholder farmers, it's one key thing, but also contributing to land degradation and food security. It goes beyond. By including the smallholder farmers, we make it more inclusive, and also by applying new technologies, we make it more scalable. And I think that's all what we want to envision also as Rabobank by growing a better world together. Thank you. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Jelmer. So what insights can we retain after the different speakers' presentations? I noted that Nicola announced forthcoming EU guidelines for recognition of carbon farming schemes. Since verified carbon units are nothing more or less than new money, the importance of this regulatory framework cannot be overemphasized. Moreover, he listed also various European incentives which will become operational in the coming months, and not in least the communication on carbon by the end of 2021. Georg demonstrated that Indigo does not only have a theoretical concept, but are really into practice. Using Indigo's approach, verified carbon units can be issued and sold to interested buyers, and thus generating income for farmers. For Bella, carbon farming is the capstone for the upscale of regenerative farming practices on mineral soils to prove value creation, handle complexity, and navigate vested interest in a long-term perspective. Valentina underlined that the uncertainty about the technical feasibility of rewetting and the lack of common regulatory framework, also social recognition and the lack of long-term perspective, hinder the creation of carbon market for peatlands. Rolf brought us down to earth again. Farm carbon is not the solution, but a solution. Agriculture is still a net emitter. Offsetting can have serious negative side effects, and without a proper framing within the CAP, carbon farming could lead to the could not lead to the hoped for results. And finally, I think Jelmer showed how agroforestry, another flagship eco scheme proposed by the European Commission, can improve soil health, yields per hectare, and so on. But MRV and certification costs might hinder smallholder farmers to access the carbon market. Let's open now the discussion between our panelists, and I would ask first of all to Nicola if he might have a question for another speaker.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. I'm really I have a lot of questions, but maybe I would like to have a question for Georg on from Indigo. Yeah, well, we see the implementation work that they are doing. They are among the pioneers in building a system for rewarding farmers for their climatic efforts. But yes, we also for the time we couldn't go probably really on which are the main technical challenges of running these these schemes in Europe, and also I'm also thinking not only at climate but also at biodiversity. If we're also thinking at rewarding farmers for their efforts on biodiversity as well, there might be even more challenging here in measuring what they are doing. So just for you, what is the biggest barrier that is basically hampering or that potentially will hamper the diffusion of schemes for rewarding farmers, and what is the best argument, the best narrative that you are maybe experiencing in talking with farmers, if any, to make them working on in this context in an efficient way. Thank you very much, Georg.
Thanks, Nicola. And although the question is quite complex, so I could spend quite some time on it now, but I try to keep it really compact. So I think one of which is, of course, certainly from a technical point of view, we have heard this also from Jelmer and from Bela, but from very different angles, and from Rolf as well, again from a different angle. So one of which is, of course, you need to make sure that you can measure. So there's always a mixture, but cost efficiently measuring as well. Going forward, and their technology plays our way, because you do soil sampling and then you can do modeling. You have satellite imagery, as we've seen with Jelmer, and the emergence of new technology helps us, of course, to have a much more cost-efficient measuring of the carbon which is sequestered than in the past, where sampling combustion methods are, of course, very precise, but they're also very costly. So finding that right balance, having that in the right way, is certainly the technical challenge behind that, and have the right algorithms. I think the other piece which is critical, and I think Rolf also alluded to this, is, of course, the permanency is super important. And then there is a question on, of course, the debate on how much carbon can be really sequestered within the soil. We believe there is a massive sink potential, and hundreds of millions of tons of carbon can be sequestered. But I agree as well that it's, of course, not enough. Reduction of emissions, as pointed out also, is absolutely critical. In parallel, I still strongly believe that agriculture can play a role and can contribute to the reduction of climate change, and so therefore, why wouldn't we try and go for it? And I think that's critical, which leads me to the other piece of the challenge. It's, of course, having the farmers' confidence of change. And Bela, I think, pointed that out. There are two things in there. One is the financial. So there's, of course, a lot of efforts which need to be made if you put, land aside and make permanent grassland out of it, etc. So the cost-reward equation needs to fit. And not to forget as well, farmers need to be comfortable in changing their practices, because you do farming different than what you've done before. And Bela certainly is a pioneer in his field, and we have many around us, not many Belas, but many others as well. But we recognize as well that this transition of having the confidence for the farmers to make these moves and stick with it are also challenges which might be less technical than basically changing your habit. I think so. These are the key elements. And to the other piece quickly on the for us, so it is very important that, and I've mentioned this a few times, is that the quality needs to be ensured. And so that's why we went with the methodology approach, which is very robust and reviewed. And we want to make sure that we can really prove that what we say is done is really done. Last but not least, to your point of the biodiversity, not currently in the Indigo Carbon Program. Biodiversity in its own right. I think, of course, certainly everything which is cover crops, etc., is there. But we know that there are also other programs out there, specifically in the CAP and other areas where biodiversity is incentivized and supported. And that is certainly very good as well, because it helps the farmers to make also moves in this direction. Right. I hope that answers in a nutshell a little bit the question, Nicola, and I'm happy to discuss this more with you. But if I'm allowed, Mark, to ask the question, I would have one on actually to what I said earlier to Valentina, because she's been working on this. But what your view would be on what has the biggest impact in terms of the amount of soil organic carbon which can be sequestered in the soil. So which Regen Ag practice has it? We have a view on it, but I would love to have the scientific view on this one. And then also, what you expect somehow to see now coming out of the debate in the EU on the soil health strategy would be super interesting for me to understand.
Yes, I was unmuted. Thank you, Georg, for your question. So first part of your question, you asked which are the most effective practices, the best practices for increasing carbon in soil. Well, unfortunately, I don't think there is one recipe. Like I would say that I'm against giving. There is no one practice that can work, and I think I can relate it a lot with also what you said in the presentation, but also what Bela underlined, that the concept of regenerative agriculture, I think, is really much in line with the ecological complexity. So we can't just do one thing. We cannot focus our attention on one practices, but we need to approach the system in a complex way. So in that sense, I think is important. And is, well, you also mentioned the scientific point of view. Well, now we are also facing a paradigm shift also in soil science, because so far we tend to think that we need to add recalcitrant substances, so substances that are resistant to degradation in soil to increase organic matter. But now new research are coming out, new insight that says that indeed may not be true, that the role of microbes and microbial community are much more important, and then that we need to stimulate microbial activity. So a lot of discussions then arise on what we need to do, what kind of soil amendment we need to add to soil to make it the soil storing carbon. So the questions are open, and that's why we need to keep open and not focusing on one practices, one solution like reduce fertilizer input or crop rotation, but actually try a more systemic approach, integrated approach. And then to move to the second question that you said, what do I expect or what I wish for the health soil strategy from Europe? Well, connecting to research, maybe I'm a bit biased by my position, but I think we do need more research. And also to come up with methodology that are able to demonstrate actually the effectiveness and the efficiency of the measures that farmers can put in place. So we need also a shared framework and shared methodology that everyone can agree. I really think remote sensing, new technology can help us and can, as you said, balance cost and efficiency. On the other hand, we also need that these systems are equal for everyone, because if we adopt different methodology in different places, it's very difficult then to scale up and actually allow the credit system to take in place. And third things I expect from the healthy soil strategy, so the research, I said, the common methodology, and again, I already said for peatland, but in general, we need incentive for farmers that, I mean, for years, for decades, we push and we ask for more production, more production. We need to feed the world. We need to ask more yield to the soil. Now the attention needs to be moved to something else. We don't have to look only at the production, but we need to look for also take care of our future and see which are the practices that actually reward and actually allow that the soil will be fertile and will provide food also in the future. And that's also for farmers, because, okay, maybe 20 years they can still farm, but then no soil, no crop. So we do need a clear message toward rewarding farmers for the good practices. I hope this, I got a bit passionate, but I hope this answer your question, Georg.
Thank you very much, Valentina.
Thank you. Thank you. Valentina, you have a question? Yeah.
Yes, indeed. On the same line about incentive, this brings to my question that I would like to do to ask to Bella. So I think we all agree that we need incentive, at least for now. You mentioned I'm not a fan of incentive, but at this moment the count doesn't balance without incentive. So for carbon farming, what do you think would be the most effective way to reward the farmer? So should we include carbon farming in the policy framework, in the European framework, for example, also in the CAP, or do you think it would be more effective to have a carbon credit system or scheme that is independent and then and that follow the rules of the free market, like the classical carbon credit scheme? Can you give me a perspective from your point of view? Would be very nice.
A super interesting question. I will try. Just to put a dot on the horizon, if you think very long term, I would say it would be great if the market would pay a good price for carbon, because what would that mean at the end if that would work? If it's a marketplace, that would mean that instead of farmers taking a good percentage of the EU Commission's budget in form of, let's say, more anonymous subsidies, it would be related to a performance of a farmer ecosystem service and doing a benefit for society. So I think if in an ideal world, I would say if that would work, it's the very best because less dependency on subsidies and more related to the actual added benefit for society by farmers. It also will close a bit the divide, which I think is over the last years happening, where farmers are often depicted, you get subsidy and you're not helping the ecosystems. I think that will bring it together. And I think in that sense, it would be positive if there would be a working market for that. The second reason I think a market would be good, it is a very complex system to get this carbon scheme in place. We know this from farming practices, from measuring, from carbon credits on the market. A lot of innovation is needed. And I think the innovation of this kind of activities is best placed in a market setting and not necessarily centrally controlled by governments or commission. Having said all that, that's in an ideal world. Right now, we have to move on, and right now, farmers have to get incentives, and therefore the CAP is the place to give the ecosystem incentives that farmers have to follow. You said it, Valentina, yourself. The CAP had a history in maximizing production. That's what farmers did. And now we have to move on to go into the direction of ecosystem services. That's a big step and a big move, and I hope in the next phase of the CAP that is being represented. And also, just a note on that, I hope that in the eco schemes that are planned for the Pillar 1 in the next CAP, that is not enough. We have to really go beyond that and keep on Pillar 2 as well, a lot of incentives to make these ecosystem services happening and being adopted large scale by farmers. I hope I covered that question.
You also a question that was put in the chat box in the question and answers, because there are a lot of questions about combining the market, the carbon markets, and the subsidies at European level. But I understand that we have to look for a combination at the moment. Bella.
The phased approach, I would say. It takes in phases, this approach. If I may, I have a question for Jelmer. I would like to ask you also adoption in agroforestry, according to your experiences with your program. What is keeping, you mentioned some elements, but what is more keeping adoption of your agroforestry practices, especially for the smallholder farmers you are involved in? Are you muted for a moment?
Yes, thanks, Bella, and a very relevant question. As we are addressing smallholder farmers with limited numbers of hectares, and we still want to make some impact, it's also a numbers game. So we also ambition to serve millions of farmers. So scalability, therefore, scalability is key. With remote sensing, already mentioned, this is one of the elements that we can bring this skill, but still it's challenging. In practice, what we see, one of the key reasons that holds back is the financing. So especially local financing always was focused on a 1-year crop cycle. With agroforestry, the first results from food produce are only after the first few years, and it requires also a different way of financing. As also the creditworthiness of those smallholder farmers. So the financing is one hurdle where we are currently looking for ways how we can solve it. Another one is just the infrastructure. Whether it's the education, how we can train farmers at scale with videos, how they should seed, plant. It really shouldn't underestimate it, how difficult it is sometimes to really transition those farmers in those developing countries to planting trees. And besides the education, it's also, for instance, the nurseries, making sure that enough species are available at scale. And I think the last one is the understanding of the potential of agroforestry and the system on itself. So how our different species are reinforcing itself. A tree that's collecting nutrients from meters below the ground up to a ground cover, for instance. But also to live up to the integrity of the program. Are we really improving the livelihoods of those farmers? And are we really contributing to higher food productivity and income. And as such, for instance, also increasing the biodiversity, the soil quality. And it also, I think, therefore, I'm also very curious about the experience of roll-off. So we want to measure the impact on soil quality, measure the impact on biodiversity. And I'm also very curious about the experience of roll-off, how you think that technology also can, so we leverage technology to measure the delta in biomass, but how can we leverage technology also to prove the impact on biodiversity? And what would be the experience for the Worldwide Fund on this topic?
Rolf, the floor is yours.
Sorry?
The floor is yours, Heap.
Sorry, I had some internet connection problems. So, Jelma, you already asked the question, right?
Exactly. The question to you is, how can we leverage technology to monitor the impact on biodiversity?
Maybe before I start, let me first of all say I'm a real big fan of agroforestry systems as such, and I worked a good part of my career with the Agroforestry Center in Nairobi, who do nothing but agroforestry. So this is, and you've highlighted the many benefits of these systems. But to come back to the technology, in terms of monitoring biodiversity, I mean, the short answer is I don't think we have a shortage of monitoring capacity. So we know quite well the status of our biodiversity and how quickly it's declining. And I already wrote in the chat that if people are interested, they can just Google the IPBES report from 2019, which pointed out very clearly in what dire states the nature is these days, and how urgently we need to change our way of managing systems and agriculture, including agriculture. I think we see way too much business as usual and complacency these days. We face climate change at the same time. We face a massive loss of biodiversity. So we need to do way more and be more bold and ambitious. So the time for excuses is really over, and I believe that's possible. So I'm not a pessimist. I think we can live in harmony with nature. There is no shortage of proven cases, and agroforestry would be one of them, that we can sustainably produce food, do sustainable agriculture that can feed a growing population without doing further harm to nature and climate. So we have the science, we have the methods, we have the tools, and in Europe, I would say we even have the money. So we have a lot of money floating around in the system. It is often the political will that is lacking, or that is dragging behind. So that's why I wanted to come back again to the common agricultural policy. I think there's a lot of potential in there to get things going in terms of sinking more carbon into soils and reducing the footprint of agriculture. But before I continue and ask my question to Nicola, I wanted to point out once again, we need to look into the need for additionality. The Paris goals say these carbon sinks need to be additional. It's not something business as usual that is rewarded. That means if we go into something like ambitious eco schemes, then that's it. Then there's nothing more to sell, because the eco scheme provides for the carbon sink. Then companies cannot say, oh, a farmer, please do X, Y, Z and get an additional ton of carbon, because then we are at our limits. And the second thing, double accounting, I find it very, very difficult and tricky to handle. And I will give you the example of agroforestry. So you grow a forest, the farmer gets credit for this. That means the farmer has sold that sitting stock of carbon. It's no longer his or hers. That means if you now think about, okay, I'll bring that carbon to another company that, for example, turns it into biochar. then the biochar can no longer be put into the soil because it already has been accounted for in the first place. So that's very, very tricky. So in that sense, I really would give a word of warning to farmers to be careful how they sell their assets and to at what price and for what long of a period. Now the agricultural sector is not yet in a position that it needs to it's part of binding reduction goals, but it may be, and then farmers themselves might be in a position to buy certificates, and that will be a tricky issue. But anyway, I've spent too much time answering your question. I wanted to come back to Nicola and the CAP, because that I find probably the most important piece in the discussion. If the CAP is providing incentives via good agricultural environmental conditions or the conditionalities, this would allow the sector to reduce emissions, greenhouse gases. But of course, and I laid it out before, it would reduce the attractiveness for private companies to in that domain to come in and have a share of the whole pie. So then I think there's clearly a conflict of interest, and I wanted to hear DG Agri's opinion on this, and how do you avoid that the political agenda is lobbied and influenced by people who are into profit-seeking business here.
Your mic.
Now?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, somebody muting and unmuting me from the earth. No, yeah, thank you, Rolf. I mean, that's really the point here about that. It's actually looking at what will be the long-term vision on how all these pieces will interact. But I can reassure that that we are considering in the discussion that we are having within the Commission all these aspects that you are mentioning. The CAP is one element, of course, that can incentivize. But for example, for what we are seeing, there are also other programs. For example, also member states that are having their own programs on this aspect. For example, what is happening in France, if with the label bas carbone, if I'm not mistaken, where they are not using the CAP money, but they are trying to. They are already building kind of certificate exchanging of certification systems within France. I mean, there might be several levels of interaction of all the different pieces. From my perspective, personal perspective, I also would like to know what the private models would think about this interaction between the common agriculture policy and their business model. In most of the cases, business models are really now starting to be defined, and it's very interesting when we meet with private schemes, with owners of private schemes, to try to find how these issues can be solved. And I mean, as you said, the CAP, it's in its proposal, at least it looks really promising for helping climate objective, and also biodiversity as well. And it is part of a bigger context, a bigger container, which is the Green Deal at the end of the day. So, and this will not change. These ambitions will remain for the common agriculture policy to help in this transition. And if you look at if we all look at the recommendation of the common agriculture policy of the DG Agri that produced for the member states, it's already there. The first step to try to align the strategic plan in their design with all the world climatic targets with the Green Deal targets, with Green Deal priorities, and both climates and as well biodiversity. It's one of the things that we mentioned several times in the recommendations, and I will keep this will remain important in the discussion, and in the following interaction with member states, we try to keep the higher ambitions for all the environmental objectives. Personally, again, in doing this discussion, which is really something new that is happening, and we are discovering more and more new aspects on that. Personally, I see that there might be even some complementarities between private schemes and common agriculture policy incentives. This baseline issue, Rolf, that you mentioned, it's indeed very important. The additionality it needs to be there, but we still don't know how carbon farming schemes could be potentially designed in the common agriculture, in the strategic plan, as eco schemes or as agro-environmental measures of the Pillar 2. Pillar 2 remains also another important measure, because actually it can also finance several side measures which are important enablers, for example, advisors to farmers, or providing some investments. So I think that's the point that you raise are very important, and we are aware of that, and I think that we don't have an answer now, but I can reassure that these are discussed. You know, there is also another element. For example, it's linked with the time frame of the CAP. CAP sometimes is working on 7 years only, but for carbon you need maybe projects which are longer than 7 years. This monitoring, reporting, and verification are very costly, and then maybe they are too much expensive to be implemented in the context of the common agriculture policy. And then again, the common agriculture policy is only having a big effect on land that is managed by farmers. So there's still big potential in seeing elsewhere. So all these aspects needs to be really understood and discussed more and more in the coming days.
Thank you very much, Nicola. So we are coming to the end of this webinar. I think we have learned today that carbon farming can make an undeniable contribution to achieving the Europe's climate objectives, but that it is not a magic bullet. Moreover, I think there is still a lot of work to be done. Nicola demonstrated that the Commission is working very hard to get this regulatory side in place. And I think last but not least, farmers, foresters, and nature managers will only opt for it if they are more than compensated for the cost that carbon farming entails. Of course, we do not have to forget all the co-benefits that carbon farming can bring along. So there is still much to be discussed and clarified, but the fact that there are already numerous initiatives in the field, and especially that you attended, dear audience, this webinar in such large numbers, should give us confidence that we are on the right track towards a real win-win between landmen and landwomen and our climate ambitions. And so I would ask us together, let's continue to play together, to join forces, to engage. The time has come to act. It's left for me now to thank some people. First of all our panelists, Nicola, Georg, Bella, Valentina, Rolf, and Jelmer. Thank you very much for sharing your vision and insights with us. You were superb this afternoon. Also, many thanks to the back office, Anne-Sophie and Marie. Without your organizational and technical support, this would not have been possible. And finally, I think I have to thank once more the initiators of this event, ELO and Indigo. To all of you, keep safe and see you alive and well at another physical occasion. Bye-bye.